Ever feel like you need, I don't know, a secret decoder ring just to figure out why your prescription costs what it does?
Yeah, you're definitely not alone
The
there.
news around drug prices, it's a lot. Constant information overload.
It really is.
Well, think of this as your personal guide, your express lane to understanding it all. Welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be digging into this. Today, we're tackling a really crucial and, let's face it, often confusing topic, pharmaceutical drug pricing right here in the U.S.
And we've pulled together quite a range of sources to help us make sense of it.
We're looking at expert analyses from places like Drug Patent Watch and the RAND Corporation, that's a nonprofit research group.
Okay.
Plus, White House fact sheets detailing recent government actions, some insights from a medical journal, an academic paper, a whole mix.
So our mission today, it's pretty straightforward. Cut through all that complexity.
Right.
We want to pull out the most important insights into why these drugs cost so much, and maybe more importantly, what's being done now to try and change things.
Exactly. What does it mean for you, someone who wants to be informed without drowning in data?
That's the goal, giving you that clear, manageable understanding. We'll use the expert takes, the official lines, the academic research. Try to get the full picture.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with the basics, the thing everyone talks about, the high cost of drugs. What actually goes into that price tag you see?
Well, there are several key pieces. First up, and you hear this a lot from the industry, is R&D research and development.
Right, the cost of discovering the drug.
Exactly. Bringing a new drug to market is incredibly long and expensive, the average estimate, around $2.6 billion. And that includes the cost of all failures along the way, too.
Wow, okay, $2.6 billion.
Yeah. So this massive upfront investment, that's really the industry's core argument for why prices start so high. It's a key insight, really.
Makes sense. What else?
Then you've got the clinical trials, huge expense there.
Testing it on people.
Right. Manufacturing the drug itself, distributing it, marketing and advertising, which could be significant.
Oh, yeah, you see the ads.
And navigating all the regulations, getting FDA approval, that's a complex, costly process. And finally, of course, there's the profit margin the companies build in.
And wrapped up in all that is the patent system, right? Which seems like, well, it helps innovation, but maybe keeps prices up too. Kind of a double-edged sword.
That's a perfect way to put it. Patents usually give a company 20 years of exclusivity.
20 years.
And the idea is to let them earn back that huge R&D investment and make a profit. Dr. Kenneth Caton called patents the lifeblood of the industry. It's that incentive to take the risk.
Okay.
But yeah, that exclusivity means they often have a monopoly for that period.
Right.
No direct competition. And that definitely influences pricing decisions.
But those patents don't last forever. Eventually they expire.
Correct.
And that's when the generic versions can finally show up, which usually means relief on the price front. I think they call it the patent cliff.
You got it.
Yeah.
That patent expiration is key. It opens the door for generic manufacturers to make their own versions.
More competition.
Exactly. And that competition almost always drives prices down significantly. It's a huge source of savings. Actually, the Association for Accessible Medicines found generics saved the U.S. healthcare system something like $293 billion in just 2018.
Wow, $293 billion.
So yeah, the patent gives that initial protected period, but the generics coming in later are crucial for making drugs more affordable over time.
Okay, so those are the building blocks of the price. But the part that really gets people talking is how much more we pay here in the U.S. compared to, other similar countries. That RAND report laid it out pretty clearly, didn't it?
It really did. Their latest report, looking at 2022 data, found U.S. prescription drug prices are, on average, 2.78 times higher than in 33 other developed OECD countries.
Almost 3 times higher.
Yeah. And it gets worse for brand name drugs. For those, U.S. prices are a staggering 4.22 times higher.
4 times. That's
Wow.
incredible.
It is. And that's a key takeaway.
Mm.
We're paying nearly 3 times more overall, largely because we don't have the same kind of government price controls as other wealthy nations, even after you account for discounts and rebates here in the U.S.
Which we hear about.
Right. Even after those, brand name drugs are still more than 3 times as expensive here.
So what's the main reason why this huge gap?
A major factor is that the U.S. government, for the most part, doesn't directly negotiate drug prices on a wide scale.
Unlike other countries.
Exactly. In many other developed nations, their national health systems negotiate prices directly with the drug companies to keep costs manageable. We just don't have that same broad, centralized power here, especially for the entire market.
And then there's this whole argument about foreign free riding. What's that about?
So this argument You hear it from the industry and sometimes reflected in government statements.
Okay.
The idea is that the U.S. market basically ends up funding most of the global profits for drug companies. We have less than 5% of the world's population, but account for maybe 75% of the pharmaceutical industry's profits globally.
75%.
That's the figure often cited. The argument goes that companies give discounts in other countries to get their drugs used there, and then they make up for it by charging much higher prices here in the U.S.
So the idea is we're subsidizing lower prices elsewhere.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
That American consumers are footing the bill that allows prices to be lower in other wealthy countries. It's definitely a controversial point, a lot of debate around it.
I bet. Now, the sources also mention different ways drugs can be priced. Can you give us a quick rundown of those models?
Sure, there are a few main approaches. One is pretty basic, cost plus pricing. You figure out the cost to make the drug and add a set profit margin. Simple enough.
Okay.
Then there's value-based pricing. This one tries to link the price to the actual benefit the drug provides.
How well it works, basically.
Yeah, like does it improve quality of life significantly? Does it reduce hospital stays, save costs elsewhere? They try to quantify that value and set the price accordingly. Think of a breakthrough cancer drug. Its price might reflect the huge benefit it offers.
Interesting.
There's also tiered pricing, where you charge different prices in different markets, maybe based on a country's income level or how much they buy. And finally, reference pricing. That's where you set your price based on what other similar drugs cost or what the same drug costs in other specific countries.
Gotcha. So understanding those helps frame how people are trying to change the actual prices we pay.
Exactly. It provides context for the policy debates.
Okay, good context. Now, let's shift to what the government is actually trying to do about these high prices. This most favored nation idea, or MFN, keeps popping up.
Yes, the MFN approach.
Yep.
It's a policy proposal that essentially aims to tie U.S. drug prices to the prices paid in other similar developed countries.
Trying to get us a better deal, basically.
Yeah, that's the idea. President Trump issued some executive orders on this, and there were more recent announcements, like on May 12, 2025. The stated goal, often found in the White House materials, is to tackle that foreign free-riding issue we talked about.
Okay.
To make sure Americans aren't paying vastly more than people in, say, Germany or France for the same medication. Key insight here. MFN tries to leverage those lower international prices to bring down U.S. costs.
So how would it actually work? Like, what's the mechanism?
Yeah, the core concept is setting a benchmark. The U.S. price for certain drugs shouldn't be higher than the lowest price paid among a selected group of comparable nations.
The most favored nation price.
Exactly. The Secretary of Health and Human Services, HHS, was directed to figure out a system, potentially one where patients could even buy drugs directly from manufacturers at those MFN prices.
Skipping the usual chain.
Possibly. Kind of cutting out the middlemen was part of the thinking. And the orders also said, look, if the drug companies don't voluntarily lower their prices towards these MFN targets,
So what?
then HHS should start the formal rulemaking process to impose those prices and consider other strong actions to force costs down.
Now, this isn't the first time we've heard about MFN, is it? Feels familiar.
You're right, it's not new. The first Trump administration also pushed for MFN pricing.
What happened then?
It ran into roadblocks. The pharmaceutical industry filed lawsuits, and ultimately those earlier efforts were blocked by the courts and didn't get implemented. The Biden administration later formally withdrew those specific rules.
But now it's back on the table.
It seems so. The current administration signaled they want to revive these kinds of price caps, potentially even including drugs covered by Medicaid this time around.
Okay.
And we heard from the CMS Administrator Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz, back in May 2025, saying they plan to start talking to drug companies about specific MFN price targets pretty soon, like within the next month.
So the conversation is definitely happening again. What's the reaction been this time? I imagine the drug industry isn't thrilled.
That's putting it mildly. They've strongly opposed MFN pricing. They've called it a deeply flawed proposal.
Strong words.
Yeah, and even suggested it's like importing socialized medicine. John Crowley from the Biotechnology Innovation Organization raised serious flags. He argued it could really hurt investment in R&D for new cures.
The innovation argument again.
Right, and potentially harm patient access to medicines and cost American jobs in the pharma sector. The core argument remains. Lower prices mean lower profits, which they say directly translates to less innovation.
And they push back on the free riding idea.
They argue foreign countries should pay more, their fair share, for the R&D costs. And they often point fingers at middlemen, like PBM's pharmacy benefit managers, saying they're a big part of why list prices are high, even if net prices are lower.
Interesting. So the industry blames PBMs, but the MFN plan also talked about potentially cutting out middlemen.
Exactly. It's a complex dynamic. The Trump administration's approach included exploring that direct manufacturer-to-patient sale at MFN prices, which would indeed bypass the PBMs.
So what do the PBMs think about all this?
Well, PBM representatives, like Lopes mentioned in one source, tend to say they support lowering the list prices of drugs, which MFN aims to do.
Okay.
But, a system that encourages direct sales at MFN prices could fundamentally change their business model. Their role in negotiating rebates and managing formularies might look very different, so it's complicated for them too.
And are there any potential downsides, like unintended consequences, if MFN were actually put into place?
That's a major concern raised in some analyses, like one from the Kaiser Family Foundation, KFF.
What's the worry?
The worry is that drug companies, faced with lower mandated prices in the huge U.S. market, might just turn around and raise their prices in those other countries to make up the difference.
So protect their overall global revenue.
Exactly. If that happened widely, the global price landscape might just shift around, and U.S. patients might not see the huge savings hoped for, while patients in other countries could end up paying more.
It really shows how interconnected this all is.
Wow. Okay, stepping back from the big policy fights for a moment, the sources also really hit home the personal impact of these costs, especially the disparities.
Absolutely. It's crucial not to lose sight of that. One source highlighted research showing that because of high out-of-pocket costs, nearly a quarter, 25% of Americans struggle to afford their prescriptions.
1 in 4. That's a lot of people.
It is. And this burden doesn't fall equally. Vulnerable groups often feel it most acutely. For example, studies show youth with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, often need multiple psychotropic medications, leading to really high healthcare costs for families.
Right.
And we also saw mentions of the ongoing shortages of ADHD medications, which adds another layer of difficulty to access and affordability for those who depend on them. It's sobering that nearly a quarter of people face tough choices about their health because of cost.
And there was that specific example with the hepatitis C drugs that really illustrated both the problem and maybe some creative solutions. Yes, that was a powerful case study. Drugs like Sovaldi and Harvoni were huge breakthroughs. They could actually cure hepatitis C.
Amazing.
But the price tag, it was around $1,000 a pill, an $84,000 treatment course.
Whew.
It was so high that many insurers, even state programs, had to restrict access, only giving it to the very sickest patients initially.
So a cure existed, but people couldn't get it because of the cost.
Precisely. But that situation also sparked innovation in payment models. Louisiana, for instance, adopted a Netflix-style subscription model.
Like pay one price for unlimited access.
Kind of. The state paid a manufacturer a fixed annual fee for unlimited access to the hepatitis C cure for their Medicaid and prison populations. It showed a different way to think about paying for high-cost cures to ensure broad access.
That's fascinating. Okay, so if MFN is one big idea but has its challenges, what other potential solutions came up in the sources we looked at?
There are quite a few other potential levers mentioned. Getting generic drugs and also biosimilars, which are like generics for complex biologic drugs, approved faster is a big one.
More competition sooner.
Exactly. The idea of value-based pricing we touched on earlier, really trying to tie price to proven clinical benefit, that's gaining ground. Organizations like ICER, the Institute for Clinical and Economic Review, are influential here, suggesting price benchmarks based on value.
Okay.
A really big one, politically debated for years, is allowing Medicare to directly negotiate drug prices.
Like the VA does.
Right. The potential savings there could be huge, given how many people Medicare covers. Then there's tackling the issue of big price hikes on existing drugs, ones that have been around for years.
Like insulin.
Insulin is the classic example. Humalog went from maybe $21 back in 1999 to over $300. Addressing those kinds of increases is key.
What else? Any other ideas floated?
Yeah, things like demanding more transparency from the PBMs about their deals and rebates.
See where the money actually goes.
Right. Making sure those rebates actually get passed on to patients at the pharmacy counter. Also, maybe being tougher on approving drugs that offer only very small benefits over what's already available. And the idea of legalizing personal importation of drugs from, say, Canada, where they're often cheaper. That comes up too.
It's definitely clear there's no silver bullet here, is there? We've covered so much ground. The basic costs, patents, why U.S. prices are so high, the MFN debate, other potential fixes.
Yeah, it's incredibly complex. You've got this constant tension, this balancing act. On one hand, pharmaceutical companies need to fund that vital, risky research for new treatments. That's undeniable.
But on the other hand,
On the other hand, you have the absolute necessity of making sure medications, especially life-saving ones, are affordable and people can actually get them when they need them.
it's a tough needle to thread.
It really is.
So, as you've been listening and taking all this in, here's something to chew on. Considering everything we've unpacked today, the R&D puzzle, the patent system, the global price differences, all the policy ideas like MFN or Medicare negotiation, and the real-world impact on people, what single change do you think would make the biggest difference? What one thing could most effectively make prescription drugs more accessible and affordable here in the U.S.?
And just as importantly, what might be the ripple effects of that change, good and bad?
Exactly. There are always trade-offs. It's a critical issue, clearly no easy answers, but definitely one worth thinking more about and keeping an eye on.